We've been having a conversation here since the beginning of January about kind of key concepts. And today I wanted to talk about a key image. This is something that shows up in the Soto Zen world a lot. And it can look just ornamental, it can look kind of pretty, and we can see it over and over again without noticing that we're looking at something that matters. But the image is of plum blossoms. In Japanese, we say Baika. Um, Dogen loved plum blossoms. And so they show up a lot in his writing, and they show up a lot in the imagery of this tradition. Um, a really simple example, but an important example, is that when there's Dharma transmission between teacher and student, the documents, the transmission documents, have to be you use these special pieces of silk that can only be, you have to have permission to have these pieces, and there's a kind of there's this faint image in the silk of plum blossoms. It just permeates things like that, where in one light you wouldn't notice it, and in another light you'd say, "Oh, something is here." So I thought I would talk about this a little bit today because it's the kind of thing where if you're paying attention to this tradition, if you're looking at especially things that are happening in Japan, once you know that it's there, you start to see that it's there everywhere. Plum blossoms don't originate in Japan, though they're really important in Japanese culture. They came from China, and they came during the Tang Dynasty, so just a few centuries before Zen appeared in Japan. And plum blossoms have this kind of important uh, role to play in a culture that is obsessed with seasons. There's a real attention given to when spring is arriving and when summer has, or I guess when the rainy season has hit, and then when summer has hit, and then when fall has hit. And if you watch the news during spring, especially, the cherry blossoms are tracked in terms of, so in this region it's happening now, but in this region it's going to happen then, and people follow them. People have this sense of when Japan is coming to life in these different ways. And a lot of that attention is put on cherry blossoms. Cherry blossoms are so central to how Japan understands itself and how Japan presents itself. And cherry blossoms are kind of perfect. The trees are kind of smooth, and they line parks, and you can look down, you can see a row of 50 cherry trees, and they'll all be exactly the same height. They look like exactly the same thing. And for just a couple weeks, they all look like cotton candy because they're bright, bright, bright pink. And the whole world is pink. And everyone walks around kind of happy. And we have there are these kind of ritual picnics everybody does. You have to go out and have a picnic underneath the cherry blossoms while they're happening. But then they start to fall. And when they start to fall, there's this kind of poignant feeling of, oh, something beautiful arrived and then it went away. I was once at a gathering of young monks, novice monks, and the task was everyone was invited to bring a very short Dharma talk, something you might um, give on the fly. For example, if a family came to the temple because someone had passed away and you just wanted to be able to say something profound. So everyone prepared their little thing and they were going to share it with the group so that these senior teachers could kind of comment or critique. And everybody's kind of nervous and they're ready. And just before the first person goes, one of the senior teachers said, "Oh, and please don't talk about cherry blossoms." He said, "If I have to listen to one more Dharma talk, about cherry blossoms. And every single face in the room sank because everyone had prepared the Dharma talk about cherry blossoms. Everyone was going to talk about impermanence and beauty and loss. And it's so built in that this is a kind of shorthand for one part of the teaching. So in my mind, plum blossoms kind of exist in contrast to that. Because plum trees, unlike cherry trees, are not all perfect. And you can't make them all look uniform. They're very jagged, and their bark can be quite rough. It can even be sharp, depending on what kind. And they bloom earlier. They really are the things that say it's spring. Or that I should probably truer to say, they say spring is coming. So what you find is this imagery of plum blossoms in the snow. And if you look it up, you'll find infinite photos, you'll find infinite ink paintings going back for centuries. This deep appreciation for this image of these very bright little blossoms on these jagged trees that are coming out of the snow, they're coming out of the cold. This is the tree that Dogen liked to talk about. This is the tree that captured his attention. So I wanted to read a little bit about what he said about it. Um, because even though we don't really have them here, though I have one in my backyard, it works. In Eihei Koroku, this is a collection of his very short teachings, kind of short talks that he would give. It said, the Dogen said, if this greatest cold does not penetrate into our bones, how will the fragrance of the plum blossoms pervade the entire universe? So he's equating the cold and the plum blossoms. There's something about where they come from. And he's saying if you can't feel one, if you don't allow for the one, you don't get the other. If we want plum blossoms in the world, we have to accept the cold part. Not just accept it, we have to really feel it. I think when I first encountered this, I responded to it with a mind that was maybe coming from my Christian upbringing, which is a mind that I think glorifies or valorizes suffering a little bit. Right? I read this as the good thing, the awakening, whatever it is that that we think we're showing up for, it comes out of the suffering. And so we need to lean into that in order to get this. I was in Colombia a couple of weeks ago for some ceremonies there, and we visited an old monastery, an old Catholic monastery. And there were these incredible statues in every corner. And every statue was of someone in anguish. Just looking like they were being torn apart from the inside, often looking up at the sky, kind of pleading. There was so much hurt. I grew up with that. I think many of us grew up with that. And even though it can be a little surprising at that degree, for me, there's still something very powerful about it, right? Buddhism doesn't do that. Buddhism doesn't show that part. It doesn't lean into that part. When we lean into that part, when we glorify that part, we can find ourselves thinking, have I suffered enough? Right? Have I gone to the depths of that part of my mind? Do I need to go further? Which is why we have these monks in that monastery, whipping themselves, trying to find something by, by going deeper into that part. This tradition doesn't say lean into suffering. It says wake up to suffering. Wake up to the fact that the suffering is always, always, always there. You don't need more. You don't need to cultivate it. You don't need to nourish it. You don't need to go looking for it. It found you. And it didn't just find you, it found everyone. This tradition says be aware of that. That there's no escape. Not really. We look on the news and we feel it. But we also need to look at ourselves. We need to notice in ourselves the dis-ease that we carry. And by extension, the discomfort and the pain that everyone around us carries all the time. If we let that in, if we let it soak in, that that's always there, everywhere we look, all the time, then we start to understand that if Buddha is anywhere, it's there. Not because it's the suffering, but because there's no escape from the suffering. And so there is no place that Buddha goes where that doesn't go. So when Dogen says that we have to let the cold penetrate into our bones, or else the fragrance of this flower won't pervade the world, he's saying we can't have one without the other. It's not a transaction. We aren't buying awakening with suffering. It's just a package deal. It's a BOGO situation. There's another flower that is useful to talk about while we talk about this flower, which is the Udambara flower. The Udambara flower, I've never even seen one. I don't really know what this looks like because I'm not sure if it's real. But in the story where the Buddha holds up a flower and Mahakashapa smiles, he's holding up an Udambara flower. And the legend is that at least that version of the Udambara flower is something that blossomed only once every 3,000 years. Right? The rarest of rare things. That if you see that, you saw the thing that other people don't get to see. Right? Which is powerful in part because it speaks to how we come to this. Right? If I hold myself just right, if I practice enough, if I sit enough, if I pay attention in the right way, I will see the thing. I'll see the secret thing, the rare thing. Dogen wrote a whole chapter of Shobo Genzo called Baika, called Plum Blossoms. And this is something he wrote. He said, plum blossoms in snow is the emergence of an Udambara blossom. How often do we see the eyeball of the true Dharma of our Buddha Tathagata, but do not smile, missing his blink? Now we authentically receive and accept that plum blossoms in snow are truly the Tathagata's eyeball. He juxtaposes these two flowers a lot in this text to say that what he came to discover through his encounter with his teacher, Tendo Nyojo, was that the plum blossom, which is everywhere and is in the least exotic places, that's the Udambara flower. That to notice it, to recognize it, to see it as it is no different from seeing that once every 3,000 years flower, that it's always there. That the thing we're looking for is always there. He says, how often do we look right at this thing and miss it? The Buddha held up this flower, and only one person really saw it in a crowd of 1,000. Because they were looking for something even more special than that. Dogen says you don't even need that. When you open your eyes to this flower, which is to say, when you open your eyes to the cold, when you open your eyes to the suffering of the world, you realize that you are seeing into the Buddha's eyes all the time. All the time. And so the plum blossom, this image of the plum blossom, though it's very pretty, it's intended to be nothing special. It's ordinariness. In the same way that on the altar of a Soto Zen temple, the Buddha is always a human being. There are lots of Buddhas who are not really human beings. They have all sorts of exaggerated features. They have magical qualities. Lots of different kinds of Buddhas. In this tradition, the Buddha is ordinary. We're not supposed to look for something else. We're not supposed to work on transforming into something else. We're not supposed to look to something that is anything other than us, that is anything other than our experience of the world. Our experience of the world is enough to see the world as it is. And to see the world as it is to see the world as Buddha. Both from the perspective of Buddha and also the world as Buddha. It's a simple image, but that's what it carries. And that's where I'll stop.